You have launched 3. Launching a podcast is a lot like launching a startup.
Try it, do it, and execute it, finish it. Whatever you're doing, just finish it. When you enter any social media platform, you usually get attacked with the speed and all this news and all this nonsense. Has nothing to do with you sort of centering yourself. Cannot have that in a startup environment. Everyone has to be kind of like stoked and excited and motivated. It's just not going to work. Success was really kind of creating a safe environment where people that are usually skipped over, make them feel comfortable about being seen, about sharing their resources, sharing their interests. And essentially, you have someone who goes on a crowded platform and they never say anything because they don't feel like they have a space for it. So success would be giving them that space and allowing them to share and connect and feel a little bit more comfortable. But I definitely know that there isn't anything out in the market that allows people to not feel like they have to posture and like flutter their feathers. There's a lot of feather fluttering, whether you're on Circle, Mighty.
And we're losing that entire group of people who have valuable insights and valuable shares because they're choosing not to put themselves out there, in part due to the structure of the platform.
Ooh, okay. So I have a great answer for that. And the first answer is AI, because there's a lot of people out there, and you'll learn as you build your own business that say they can do something but really can't. And that's the downfall of a lot of startups when you put that trust into someone and then you realize like, ooh, it's also about the person you're pitching to. There is no generic pitch deck situation. And so it's really important as well to think about what's important to that person and what do they value? How do those values connect? What are your shared values? I have a list of 200 people that I handpicked. The fun part is an investor who really believes in it, wants to be part of it, and understands something that you don't. People also feel loyal to a structure, similar to Marvel Comics, and they are all great personas. But when you get started, you're going to fail if you try to design for all of them.
Ayka, welcome to the show. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you having me. This is really exciting. It's always fun to talk to another fellow entrepreneur and educator. What do I do? So I'm kind of an ex-designer. I used to work in product design, and now I do a lot of mentoring. A lot of artists come to me, and I'm a good motivator. I'm good at kind of getting them out of their shell and encouraging them to put themselves out there, because if you don't put yourself out there, AI will take over. You got to just scream from the rooftops, right? And then I'm also working on a startup. I've been working on it full time for a couple of years, but it's always kind of been in the works for a lot longer than that.
Tell us about the startup.
Essentially, it all came out of this realization that networking is very cold. And you realize that when you're no longer in school and you don't have everyone holding your hand and supporting you, and you realize you have to fend for yourself. And so there's 2 ways of doing it. One way I did it is because I'm an extrovert. I just walked into a production studio and they hired me, right? I didn't really know about negotiating for my salary yet. Being extroverted helped. Another thing that helped me was my classmates. They connected me with several jobs. My favorite jobs, I worked for this company called Hanson Robotics, and it was just a really kooky company, and it was a lot of fun. I was working on the chatbot. I was working on robot controllers. I was geeking out with writers about like creating an ethical AI. That was really interesting. And just overall, everything is about connections. So my professor gave me a job. Everyone that I somehow knew connected me, which gave me this realization that the world is very unfair. And that if you don't know the right people, you might just be left out of the mix altogether, even though you're probably the best person for the job. That became part of my mission. And I was a lot more passionate about that than about design, because I would meet like all these talented people that were obsessed with like all the UI design stuff, all the different style systems. I never had that obsession. And I think that you really have to be mindful of what you really keep thinking about. And I was always thinking about connecting people. Like, how do I introduce this person who's like in Australia to that person who's in India? And kind of trying to think of ways that people connect. And that's sort of exciting to me, that just concept of it. And there isn't so much encouragement to connect on networking platforms as much. They're just tools currently for recruiters and executives to kind of let people know about their companies. There is, obviously LinkedIn has grown and it is a great place to find new people. And if you're courageous enough, you might find exactly the person that you need. But there's a lot of noise based on a lot of interviews we did. There's just a lot of noise out there. And so what we're building is kind of this networking platform that is based on this sort of cross-functional tech team where people can get interesting resources, connect each other, sort of network in a more sort of genuine sort of environment.
The name of the company is Swurl. And when you were coming up with this idea for this company, the definition of success for you and your team, what does that vision look like?
Success was really kind of creating a safe environment where people that are usually kind of skipped over, make them feel comfortable about being seen, about sharing their resources, sharing their interests. And essentially, you have someone who goes on a crowded platform and they never say anything because they don't feel like they have a space for it. So, success would be giving them that space and allowing them to share and connect and feel a little bit more comfortable.
So success is defined as your audiences using the platform in a way that makes them feel more comfortable.
Exactly, and makes them connect more and actually get from point A to point B. So there's gonna be a bit of tracking to kind of see goal setting, essentially, like, what are you trying to achieve and who are the players that you need to get to that next spot? And so we help with kind of curating that player group.
And so the devil's advocate would say, well, wait a second, couldn't I just make whatever existing social media is out there into that? Or why not use something that is already built for me, like maybe a circle or one of those kinds of platforms? What exists out there in the normal social media market and what exists out there in the custom platform market isn't for us.
Well, we did a lot of market research and we even Circle is a great place. It's really great for interest groups, like people that focus on one thing, and the structure of it is all the same. It's very similar to Facebook. You still have that sort of feed set up. They have really nice education modules. So if you're trying to create a course, it's phenomenal. For very specific things, it works really well, and I would not use anything else. But our goal is not to create a course, and it's not to create a feed with like members, with paying members. Our goal is to sort of re-envision what networking could look like in the future. And I think that AI has kind of revolutionized interfaces, and interfaces haven't caught up yet. So part of what we're doing is we're trying to come up with a completely new design for how networking could work. And you can't do that within an existing framework. And we haven't seen a lot of frameworks that work that way. So I think that, yeah, it takes a lot of innovation. I don't know if we talked about this, but one of my favorite museums is in Nashville. It's called the Museum of African American Music. It's in Nashville. It's a phenomenal museum because it doesn't like repeat what all museums do. And museums in my mind are like, kind of like funeral homes a little bit for art, unless they're designed a little bit better and they have more interactivity, but they don't really do a good job telling a story. Whereas this museum, first of all, it has these interactive screens where you click on a song and then that song kind of it shows what that song was inspired by. It kind of ripples out. And then you see those songs. And then you click on those songs and you see what those songs were inspired by. And then it can go back to like the 1800s. And like we don't really learn the history of music. We don't really know. My husband, he's very good. He's like, "Oh, I know where Snoop got that song. I had no idea." He shows me the record. I love that. And I think that that's innovation. Being able, I think creating an interface like that, that's using AI in a very innovative way that's telling a story. And I think that if we kind of use that approach to networking, there could be something special there. And I'm not sure what that looks like. We're still working on it. We're still trying to get funding, but I definitely know that there isn't anything out in the market that allows people to not feel like they have to posture and like flutter their feathers. There's a lot of feather fluttering, whether you're on Circle, Mighty, and that's because that's the way it's structured. If you post, if you interact, you'll get a response. But if you don't, that's it. You're asked out of luck. And introverted people or people that are very kind of they're very smart, but they're not going to be the ones making posts. They're kind of at a disadvantage in a way.
And we're losing that entire group of people who have valuable insights and valuable shares because they're choosing not to put themselves out there, in part due to the structure of the platform. So when you're looking at market fit and your company versus market fit, and you're doing this market research, what are some of the findings that have led you to maybe change your plans a little bit?
Oh, that's interesting. We actually pivoted quite a bit. We started mostly with the pain point of like thinking about creatives. And looking at these platforms specifically for creatives, we realized that the problem was it's all for creatives. There are all of these platforms that are have this hypothesis. If we create a platform for creatives like Behance, Dribble, we just need them. We realize that that's not the case and that creatives actually need other people to they need that technical person, they need that person who specializes in cybersecurity, they need that person who specializes in data, but there isn't it's kind of where we positioned ourselves. We're like, there's a lot of siloed groups, but where can we create a place where those groups unsilo themselves and interact?
That was this new understanding, and that new
Yes.
understanding led to creating something a little bit different than you intended.
Oh my god, it changed so much. It originally came from my husband was working on a project called Friends with FWB, Friends with Benefits, and it was very similar. I was helping him with it, and he ended up dropping it because he blew so much money on it. It's just trust, finding people to collaborate with that you can trust and that actually will do the work. Because there's a lot of people out there, and you'll learn as you build your own business that say they can do something but really can't. And that's the downfall of a lot of startups when you put that trust into someone and then you realize like, "Ooh, they're outsourcing to somebody else and that code is very dirty and it's very messy and there's no way I can understand it." Anyway, there's a lot of I can talk about red flags and
Let's do
mistakes for
that.
days.
I want I know that there are business owners, there are entrepreneurs, there are people who wanna do a startup in this audience, and they need to know about these red flags. Please do share those red flags.
Well, first of all, I wanna say that we're in a privileged space, meaning there are other countries that it's really not that easy to create an LLC. It's the government watches you a bit more, and you can't really start a business and make a ton of money. In America currently, I don't know where things are gonna go, but right now it's actually pretty easy to create a LLC. There's a lot of opportunity to innovate and build something that's useful. You just have to pick a problem and solve it. Yeah. And you have to be passionate about the problem and willing to fail. There isn't a day where I don't wake up and think that maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But in my heart, I really feel that I'm an innovator and an entrepreneur. That's just who I am. I didn't know the word entrepreneur, but that's what I was before I knew the word. So I was always kind of creating projects, coming up with new ideas and new sort of playing devil's advocate. What you should know is when you're starting something, you have people that believe in you and then you have people that question you. So it's really important so obviously you need people that'll be like, "Hey, come on. Really? Like is that what you're doing?" But they need to be people that are on your side, right? So when you're building a startup, it's very important to kind of compile a list of your confidants, the people that'll stay up with you for free and talk you through an idea. Layla Hermosi. I was listening to an interview with her and she was saying that when she looks at startups, she also looks at their network. Like who do they have in their circle? Because your circle is very important. And you realize that once you get started, because you're not going to know about everything. You're not going to be good at everything. You know, you just have to be aware of what you're good at and what you suck at, and then fill in those gaps. And the worst thing you can do is to assume that you know everything because then you'll end up tripping and falling. So the first piece of advice is like know who your people are and stick with that. Don't chase someone who you admire and try to bring them in. It's a waste of your time because they'll just look at you like you're a nobody, you know, focus on the people that really care. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is you really need to make a schedule. You know, the biggest issue is sporadic uh working sessions and you need to be like, okay, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to treat this almost like a full-time job and I'm going to schedule times where I'm going to do my social media outreach. I'm going to schedule a time where I have to look for people and talk to them. I have to schedule a time where I have to, actively look for conferences where I need to find partnerships. There's a lot of scheduling you have to do. And then I have to schedule a time to like sort of review everything. Like, are we on track? What are the things that I'm missing? Like, who do I need to talk to? And then, there's a lot of things you have to manage. And if you don't have a schedule, you'll just die. I used to hate school. I used to think it's a waste of time and it's like this industrialized model. but having some teenage stepkids who are in their 20s now, I see like it really teaches you some things about being consistent, creating a schedule, and it's almost like practicing that because if you don't have those skills, starting your own company is going to be a mess. So that's one thing. Another thing is keeping this is the one where I fell so many times finances. Like, if you do not keep track of your spending, you are going to fail. Like, you need to see everything that you do. If you're tracking it, that's helpful. And that'll give you money back at the end because when you start your company, it's all losses when you're working on taxes and you get a lot of money back. So it's exciting. But if you don't track what you're spending on, you won't get any money back. So there's FreshBooks, there's QuickBooks. Those are your best friends. You can track every expense that you have. And that's something I didn't do the first year. So don't be like me. And then once you do it, you suddenly feel this sense of like, yes, I know where the money's going. And it can be kind of depressing because that was another thing I wanted to talk about as far as challenges and mistakes. 9 times out of 10, you probably spent money on the wrong thing. And it's very important to have that person nearby who's like, you don't need to worry about that right now. That's not important. It might be fun, it might be shiny and exciting, but that's not valuable for what you're doing.
The advice that you're giving can help people who are trying to navigate and go where you are. There's so many people who get an idea for a Kickstarter campaign or an idea for a business and they never follow through and act on it. So we're inviting people to imagine that they are going to follow through and they are going to act on it. And these are the things to watch out for. Red flags.
Yeah.
What kind of red flags do you look for
Red flags with the business or with people?
with the business? Isn't the business people too?
Yeah, the business the business is people too. Well, I mean, there's a lot. Finding the right partners when you're building a tech product, you need designers, you need engineers, you need researchers, whatever. You don't really want to get someone that's too junior or too so the cheaper route is not always the best route. That's what I have to say. Because sometimes you have to go backwards and fix with that route. But there's a balance, and that's another thing. Like, when you spend too long on a product and it never really comes out, that's a red flag too. You need and that's something that I wasn't really I had people telling me, like, "Just validate it and build it in the best way you can." And that's probably my biggest thing that I would love for you to take away. If you have an idea, just create a plan, like, "What if I have to do this in a week? What if I have to do this in 3 weeks? What if someone has a gun pointed at my head and says, 'If you don't get this done in a month, you will die'?" Well, that's a bit extreme. When we operate with a sense of urgency, that's when the magic happens. But when we feel like "Oh, I'm an entrepreneur, la di da," from the bullshit, the that's when you don't get that much quality and you just get a lot of wasted time on wasted things. But I do feel good about bringing in some senior people who are a little bit more expensive, but really, like, for example, our designer who built the landing page, but also did all of the design systems. He created a design system that's very engineer friendly. You can easily flip from light mode to dark mode. Everything's named properly. That's really important. You don't want someone who just makes pretty stuff. You need someone who knows how to communicate with engineers because it won't work. That's one big red flag. If you create someone who doesn't know how to prepare files or doesn't when you're talking about technology, you're not just talking about one screen. You're talking about maybe a watch, even maybe a phone. You can't. So you need someone who knows how to build for that. And don't call yourself a UI designer if you don't. I think that finding those people are rare. A lot of the times people go into usually systems designers are the ones that are the best at it because they understand that design is not pretty pictures is a system that you build. It's a language. Same as good branding designers. Like, if you want to find a good branding designer, they're not going to just give you like a brand guide. They're going to help you understand what system you're going to use to build your visibility. As far as like getting your goals straight, setting those SMART goals and understanding what the big picture is very important. Like, right now, our big picture is getting more funding, and that's all we're focused on. And we literally paused everything else. And that's very empowering when you work towards those SMART goals. You're like, okay, I'm going to launch this by this date, and then we're going to move on. And then we're going to see where we went wrong. We're going to assess because having those retrospectives on a weekly basis are really important. Like, what did I do this week? What worked? What didn't work?
And
And then
investors want to know that.
they really do, and they wanna know the numbers, they wanna understand that you know how to grow a team, scale a team, pay a team, and not waste money, and that's another thing, I'll be honest with you, the best thing I could have done is done random things too. You have to give yourself time to do random things like meet random people, talk to a random person in a library. You never know who you're going to meet. I've met so many amazing people just by doing weird random things. And if you just keep yourself in a box, you're not going to be a good entrepreneur because you're never going to meet the right people.
What do you mean by weird random things?
Like, for example, I went to London. I saw this, like, cheap ticket to London. I've never been. I was like, "Oh, I have a friend out there," and then another friend is doing, like, a art show, and I go there, and I meet this amazing growth designer, Innie. She's gonna be in our next episode. I hope maybe I could send her to she's amazing. She's a brilliant person, and her story was crazy because she used to be a lawyer, then she was a fashion designer, then she was a graphic designer, then she was a product designer, now she's a growth designer. She's very well known in her field, which is insane, like, coming from a lawyer. I mean, like and anyway, I met her at the gallery show, and then I got to support, an artist that I've been mentoring for years, and we only met online, and we sort of built our relationships by meeting in person, and it kinda changes that. I also went to this school called Experience House, and I met the founder, Amit, and I was going through imposter syndrome maybe, like, 5 years ago, and I took a course that I found through Experience House, and, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really amazing. They bring in startups, and they create it's kind of like an incubator thing where a startup comes in, and you have, like, designers focused on the research. And so I went and met with the founder, Amit, and we just really connected, and now sort of, like, we have students working on Swurl, and then I'm sort of helping them with whatever I can, and you build these, like, amazing relationships, and he knows other people who might be our future investors. I'm just putting it out there into the universe.
And you're using all of these other things, and maybe your conversation with Amat, right? Like, you're
Right.
using all of these relationships that you've worked at. You're using the survey answers that you've done. You're using all these different data points. How do you take all of that and construct a persuasive appeal for an investor for your startup?
Ooh, okay. So I have a great answer for that. And the first answer is AI. Use the tools, man. Because I am not like a born investor, but Claude and Perplexity and ChatGPT, they've been hooking me up. They give you a structure and then you just use that structure. And then there's another tool that actually builds a pitch deck for you. And that's what I initially used.
What tool is that? We want to know. Gamma.ai, maybe?
Storydoc.com.
Storydoc.com.
Yeah. They're pretty good, but
And
there's a
they
ton of
give
them.
structure to your creative mind, your mind that is racing and doing all these creative things. These AI platforms structure the pitch and how you
Yes.
structure it in a way that makes it more persuasive. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, they do a wonderful job. They ask you kind of questions about, how much money have you made? How much money have you used? What kind of research did you do? And then it sort of generates this amazing pitch. There's a ton of them. I have a list I can provide to you that I tried a bunch of them. So that's really important. But when you're an early startup, it's not so much about the numbers, it's more about the story, being able to tell. And that's kind of what we're working on now for the Kickstarter. Telling a good story that even your kids would be like, "Oh yeah, I get it." Test it on your kids. Test everything on your kid. If you have kids or anybody who's like 12, 13, 14 years old, they will tell you the truth. Like, "That's boring. That doesn't make sense. Why do you need that?" They'll tell you. Don't be like, "Oh, they don't understand." Like, they'll understand. I definitely think kids are a great tool to use as far as finding the BS in things. It's also about the person you're pitching to. There is no generic pitch deck situation. And so it's really important as well to think about what's important to that person and what do they value? How do those values connect? What are your shared values?
Whenever you're thinking about this new venture and this new company, the website, it describes how the immigrant experience was key to this ignition of an idea for a new social platform. What kind of culture are you trying to build?
Well, so there right now things are very transactional in general, especially in corporate culture. You pay me, I do what you say. And then in general, I think in the States they kind of encourage that sort of environment, that sort of capitalist sort of style. In reality, when you don't have the funds, you need to depend on people who just want to help. And it's almost like more of a bartering situation. My family, I come from Russian immigrants and I grew up in a very kind of Russian immigrant community where people help each other out. It's not about how much. Sometimes they lend each other money they don't even have. It's just kind of about like, we support each other because we know we got nobody else around. And so I think that there's a lot of things about so I don't know if that positioning is perfect because there's a lot of things about immigrants that I don't like. They have a lot of assumptions and a lot of stereotypes about what you need to do. Like the stereotypical Russian expectations like, "Oh, if you go you have to go to medical school, become a doctor or a lawyer." But the helping, the uplifting, I think that that needs to happen. A lot of people don't know that there's a lot of services out there, especially in the States, that are there to help people that are in transition, that are just graduating, especially people that are just graduating. But you don't know that. And then a lot of people that are just graduating have no idea how to reach out to people on LinkedIn. They're not going to go on LinkedIn like, "Oh, I'm thinking about going into data science. Let me talk to a data scientist." Like nobody thinks like that.
But that's great
Maybe
advice for our listeners, isn't it?
yeah. Oh, it is. No, the people that do that do really well. I have people reach out to me all the time from my school and be like, "Hey, can you tell me, what you did?" And I'll be like, "I can tell you what I did wrong." And then I point them to other people as well because I want to help. I want to be there. And I think everybody graduating, they don't realize that there are a lot of people that really want to help you. And just kind of realizing that. So my goal is to create an environment where that's normal, to sort of normalize it. And I also wanna argue that people that are coming out of college have something to teach too.
I interview my students and I always learn something cool because knowledge isn't siloed just with people who have the years of experience. The people who are coming to something with fresh eyes can often see things that you can't because you've been doing it so long. That kind of value of the culture of respect for expertise is a really interesting cultural value that you're building into your company. Other than that value of expertise, what are the other values that you're trying to build from the ground up with this new social media platform?
I think that a lot of problems like, why do people feel like they're being fake? Why are people posturing and putting filters on themselves? Is because they don't know who they are. They haven't done the work to have that self-knowledge. Like, what is my brand? What do I represent? Who do I represent? And I think that there could be a space in a networking environment where you have a chance to really think that through rather than to be like, "Oh, let me, like, share something or reach out to someone." Because if you don't know who you are, you're never gonna do the right thing, you're just gonna stumble around. You need to know who you are, what you want, and those are the things that change just every year in your life. That's not something that ever stops. You always have to reinvent yourself. So I think that knowing why you're doing something and taking that step is also something that's really important to us, because that's when you can be authentic. That's when you can really help. And when you can kind of say, like, oh, well, I'm trying to grow in this. I don't really know this like that well, but I would love to learn rather than like, yeah, I kind of know it. Let's do it.
So that's the culture. In your experience with mapping out where you want to go, how do you articulate success? I'm imagining that it's investor funding equals new culture of social media that actually nurtures creatives and encourages the sharing of expertise without an expectation of being paid in return always. And maybe, yes, that can lead to financial relationships, but that's not the only reason we're here. Those different cultural pieces that you spoke about, what does it look like to have a successful platform? Tell us the end of that experience that you're working so hard to create.
Well, we want a small community. So I have a list of 200 people that I handpicked. So 200 plus 200 to 300 people. Most of them are specialists creating content. And the other ones are people that are just getting started in the industry and tech and like learning about the content and them kind of having a place where they can share and collect feedback. And I think if that cycle works, then what would happen is that the junior person coming in would become the specialist and share their story. And then the specialist might transition to a new jobs and become the sort of the person in transition. It would be this sort of circular experience, but there would be more of a sense of community. Like people would actually know each other and have more. And I think Circle does that really well. Like I think that just being able to meet with people on a monthly basis and like interact with people personally, I think there will be elements of that. But success is really tracking people's goals and seeing that they're kind of improving and then sharing and engaging. And I think that if that happens, then it's a successful platform because those people are not going to be the people that are going to be sharing on LinkedIn. And if they feel comfortable sharing, then we got something. We got something that works.
So, professional development platform for people who don't feel comfortable sharing on a space like LinkedIn that's helping to elevate them to then become the expert.
Yeah, well, and then also where our goal is if we don't have experts on there, so we need to make sure the experts are happy. And so a lot of experts, they are introverted, but they need visibility because they want to be sort of taken a little bit more seriously. They want to build a following. They're just not sure how to get started with that because it's not in their
Well,
DNA.
they need to eat, and you can't
Yeah.
without an audience, right? So
Exactly. So I think it helps both. I think it's not just about the junior, it's also about the senior specialist who wants a bit more visibility and wants to ask private questions to someone without feeling like the whole world will know.
even if it's not one-on-one, having a much smaller community, we both know, having been a part of communities that are small and not open to the entire social platform, there's such value in that intimacy. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. When you don't know who's out there, you just feel like you're a little fish. But when you kind of know a little bit more about what people are doing, them sharing their vulnerabilities, even like, oh, I'm not sure how to price this. Do you guys know? Like, pricing is very personal. It's not something you share on LinkedIn for sure. Yeah. So it just people being kind of more aware of each other and creating that sense of trust is really important. But you also, in these circle and communities, you need that one person who's like the king dingaling, as my husband says, like the person, the queen ding, whatever, the person that people look up to. So there is a little bit of that tribal mindset with people. Like if they have one person that they really feel like, oh yeah, that's the guy, or that kind of helps with communities.
You're trying to create that kind of community where there's just one, or are you trying to create a community where there's a bunch of those kinds of folks?
That's a bunch. That's the thing. I don't like the sort of let's look it's almost like feels very culty when there's like one person or it's like, "Hey." A little weird. That's why I'm really embracing the cross-functional concept. And when you're in working in product, they ask you like, have you worked with a cross-functional team? Because it's very important. Because when you're creating a design, you have to make sure that the design will integrate with the system and the system is easy to develop. And then you have to talk to the product owner and make sure that the product owner planned that out. And then the product owner has to talk to the product manager. It's a mess. And if you don't understand the architecture of it, you're going to fail. And I think if you're going into tech, the best thing you could do is understand every single player in the game and see how they all connect.
What feature in this user experience gives the user an aha moment? At what point do you think that your customers and community members are saying, "Oh, I get it now. This swirl thing, this is going to change my life."
When you enter any social media platform, you usually get attacked with this feed and all this news, all this nonsense. Has nothing to do with you sort of centering yourself. Like, I mean, who wants to sit around on a computer and be on a platform? This is just a tool. So the tool is like, okay, so what do I need at this moment? Where am I trying to go? Why am I even reaching out to people? Right. So centering yourself on just that and then seeing that there are people available right now from these different specialties that are willing to talk to you. Just knowing that you have that group of people that are live on the platform waiting for you to ask them something about what's relevant to you. That's the thing. Cuz then you don't have to just and then it doesn't have to be a person, it could also just be a resource, but it's all about being aware of what you need. And I think that if we get that process of like being aware of what you need and finding it and exploring it, I think that that's really helpful. And then this concept of resource management is really difficult. So people post a bunch of amazing things on LinkedIn. And I actually really highly recommend if you see something on LinkedIn that's useful for you, like it could be a video, podcast, book, take it, put it in a spreadsheet and label it like I need this for, and then the date, and like start organizing your resources because that's going to be gold in the future. Because if you're not going to be able to bookmark a resource. Even if you text it to yourself, you'll probably forget that you texted it to yourself. So I think that if we kind of combine those two problems, like instant help with a human and then instant organization of resources, then we got something. So that's what again, you're talking to me very early in the process, Ryan. So you know,
That
hopefully this
means
will
I
help.
had an opportunity to influence the process with my questions. If you were trying to describe your team and the leadership style in your team to somebody who's new, maybe an investor, How do you describe them?
I have an expectation that everyone's gonna handle their business because you don't have time for people that you need to, like, be like, "Hey, are you working on this? Hey." So, there's a trust and accountability situation, and, we always do check-ins, we always make sure that everyone's sort of aligned, and I think transparency also. I'm doing a lot of work on leadership right now. I have a coach, a leadership coach, executive coach who's helping me. He's a friend of mine. So again, like use your friends. But he's helping me understand like when am I being too nice? Because a big thing with leaders is when they first start, they're too nice. And I definitely went through that. And now I'm not nice. Now, I'm not going to waste my time. I think it's important to be transparent but not scare people and to make people excited and aware of the process and see how things connect, making sure that you have a cross-functional team, but they're all aware of each other and they are all happy to interact. And right now, everyone who is on the team has a full-time job. So it is a bit difficult with scheduling, but I think that it's starting to feel more like a unit, but it takes time.
A lesson that you learned the hard way in your journey, and I know you said you had a few, so feel free to go deep on a few.
There's people that really know how to do a job, right? But if they're not motivated by your company, they're gonna do a crap job. So even if they're amazing at what they do, if they don't feel that sort of motivation and it's just a check for them, if it's just money, that you're gonna fall. And that's exactly what I did. I worked with a UX researcher who was going through a lot personally. And that was a big red flag because everybody's going through a lot personally. But if you don't kind of really take the time to sort of understand where they're at, what's going on right now, if they just have a lot going on, that's totally fine. But it's not a good time to bring someone into sort of a high stress startup environment, if you're talking to someone who, is going through a divorce or they just graduated from college and they're trying to figure out where to live, don't work with them. Just skip it because they don't have the time or the energy to provide you the value that you need. And that was kind of my experience because I asked her to do something very simple to kind of fix. We were creating surveys. We were trying to sort of collect a larger bank of data that would be, like, easy to distribute. To me, it was I could have done it myself, like, the way she put it together, I was like, "I'm not." My background is more on sort of the UX side, but I could have created that survey and figured out the questions, and I also sort of connected her with one of my coaches who used to be a UX manager who helped craft the questions, and it was all very kind of a painful process because within every meeting, I could just tell that she was just dragging her feet. And that brings everyone down. That energy brings you cannot have that in a startup environment. Everyone has to be kind of like stoked and excited and motivated. It's just not going to work. So I think be mindful of who you bring in and how much energy you put into that because after that experience, I just wanted to sleep. I was so tired and that was just one part of the process. So I think again, it all goes back to organization and scheduling and kind of assessing what's working and what's not. And I think the biggest problem is I didn't pivot fast enough because the red flags were there from the beginning.
So you haven't actually given any value to any other investors yet?
I had someone who was an investor based in the Bay Area, very nice lady who was willing to just go 50-50 with me. And I was very interested at first. And I I started asking everybody, like, what do you think? Like, should we go 50-50? Like, should I do this? Everybody's response was like, no, this is your idea. Like, you can't give away 50%. And I think there's something to that. But in retrospect, I'll be honest with you, given all of the sort of stress that I've been through, it would have been nice to have someone in my corner who had that type of power, but also the capital that we needed to kind of pivot and everything. And I almost regret now it's been a while. I actually have a meeting with her in a couple weeks. So we'll see where she's at. It's been a while because I definitely told her like, nope, I'm good. So yeah, I think as far as the percentage, I think now it really depends on the partner too, right? Because when you look for an investor, you don't want them to just like have an idea and to give you capital, that you want them to believe in the idea and to be excited about it, right? Because otherwise you're just talking about what return you're going to give them. And that's not a fun conversation, right?
Fun.
It's not as fun. The fun part is an investor who really believes in it, wants to be part of it, and understands something that you don't. So that's kind of a huge part of it too. But whether it's marketing, sales, engineering, that's the best type of investor, someone who has a background in that. And that's what we're really targeting, people who have that interest in the company, but also, and that would be like a 40 to 50% partner right there if it's the right person. Not where we wanna see this project succeed. For us, that's a lot more important than owning the whole pie, right?
Absolutely.
Unless but it really depends. I mean, sometimes it's not very smart to give up that much equity, you know? Sometimes it's the dumbest thing you could do because a lot of people have said, "Oh, I regret selling," you know? So you just have to it depends on the situation. Depends on the situation. And that goes back to sort of asking sometimes asking for advice is important, but I think following your gut is also important. And my gut was saying back then, and that was 2 years ago, literally 2 years ago when I first started, before we even had UX and any research, anything, my gut was like, "Just go in on it with her," you know? So, that was a mistake.
If you had one piece of advice to leave your mentees with, the people who you're advising on how to do a startup, what would be that most important thing that you would want them to know?
I would say prototype it, get it done, you know? Get it done, don't overthink it, be specific, and give yourself a very tight deadline with the tiniest budget you possibly could have. And then once you have that proof, nobody can fight against it. It doesn't matter what topic it is, it could be like a medical device, it doesn't matter. But if you can kind of prototype it as fast as possible and show, that shows a lot to investors. Like, oh, wow. And for us, I think the fact that I compiled such a great team is part of that. But I think what's even better is showing a compelling prototype and showing people that you know how to put a prototype together, you know how to sort of create an idea that's actually functional, that actually shows some traction. So there's actually a book called Traction. I'll send that to you. Very helpful. Yeah. So when you have an idea, put it out, and then you might realize that it's a trash idea, and then you move on and try another idea, and then keep going until you get the best idea you could possibly get. And don't give up because you're in America and it's all about building your own company. Do it. Yeah.
It is an American thing, isn't it? Just to be a
We
startup
don't realize
founder.
it. Yeah, we don't really realize how lucky we are. It's really easy to start stuff, and there's so many services here. There's so many incubators. Find an incubator. I didn't do that because I wanted to use my own people, and I was kind of stubborn about that. But honestly, again, like if I had to do it again, I would have done an incubator because they just build it out in a couple days for you, see what happens. They test out your idea, pitch your idea, go to a pitch, go to an early startup pitch and practice pitching your idea. See how it rolls off your tongue. That's kind of my biggest thing. I would say, like, try it, do it, and execute it, finish it. The biggest thing I have is finish it. Whatever you're doing, just finish it, even if it's trash.
I love
That's
that. In
my
my
thing.
podcasting
Yeah.
class, we have minimum viable podcast, obviously, because
Yeah.
that's our idea, right? We want to make sure that you're launching because that's the only way you can learn is from
That's the only
figuring
way.
out those mistakes.
Yeah, even if you have to, like, get a crappy phone with a crappy mic, that's better than nothing, you know? That's better than telling people, "Yeah, I'm starting this podcast. When is it coming out? I don't know," you know?
Yeah.
But that's the curse of the designer. They never finish anything. A lot of designers have all these ideas.
Not just designers, right? That's a lot of us get
Just
distracted
people.
easily, and that's just life, right?
Yeah.
You got kids, you've got family, you've got your real job that pays you money, and that side hustle
Right.
becomes very difficult. So podcasting. Most people I interview have launched a podcast. Some have launched 2. You have launched 3. I know you have some lessons from that experience that can help entrepreneurs who want to launch their own podcast.
Well, first of all, you're talking to someone I'm talking to like, use Ryan, man. Like, he'll set you up. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that there's a lot of things about a podcast that are important to kind of think about it. Audio is really important. I mean, at the end of the day, you spend money on shoes, on clothing. So you can probably save up for like a $200 mic. I think that's possible. I think that's feasible. Even if you like did some gigs somewhere, sold some stuff, worked at McDonald's for like 5, you could get a mic. So get your mic. Get a good audio because if you don't have good audio, it's like really difficult to listen to the podcast. So that's first thing. The second thing is that if you do have video, I mean, for us specifically, we're not as focused on video, but if video is an important part of it, then make sure you have good lighting. make sure people don't look fuzzy. That's also really important, because it's like respecting the person who's giving you time. Every person who's listening to you is giving you time. So give it give them that respect. Another thing about podcasts is if you have a podcast and you want people to watch it, people have to know it exists. So there's a lot behind that as well. Essentially, having some sort of digestible marketing plan is very smart. So if you started a podcast, make a LinkedIn business page about it, make an Instagram about it, make a YouTube shorts about it, and make a schedule. I talked about schedule. A schedule is so important because I was back in high school, I was just the most disorganized person on the planet. And I was always like laughing at people that had a schedule for like when they're eating, when they sleep, when they do this, when they do. You have to. You have to do it. So like when you build a podcast, pick one day. It could be like every 2 weeks. It could be once a month. It doesn't matter. But just pick one day, film it, edit it, and put it out. And you don't have to do that all in one day. Like you can film it on a Wednesday, you can edit it on a Thursday and put it out on a Friday. And then so a good thing is also to build the hype in between. So it's like you film a podcast, you edit it, and then you sort of build up the hype and then you can put it out. You can do it like that. Another thing is awareness, like brand awareness. So if you have a buddy who does brand design and who wants like a first project at school, that's a great friend to have because building a podcast is also about the visibility of it. And so if you have something that's like very recognizable, maybe it's a color, maybe it's a type of font, maybe it's like an image, that's building that sort of memory. Like, oh yeah, it's that podcast that has that like cheese on it. Figuring out a way that makes you a bit more visible is very valuable, and the consistency. So it's like you don't want to have one style and then like an elegant writing style that no one's going to remember you because I'm like, I have no idea how to describe that podcast because they're always different. So building that consistency, building that uniqueness, also names are really important.
We have so many students who are struggling to launch their podcast, and they'll get this part right, but that part over there gets neglected. It's because you're only one person and you have your own individual strengths and only so much amount of time in the day. You might have other classes you're taking or a 60-hour work week. Figuring out how to focus your podcast on the things that will help it succeed is something that a lot of people struggle with. So this advice about standing out, I think, is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, and then standing out, that it comes in 2 ways, in 2 forms. There's also the written way of being, kind of having punchy titles. A lot of so there's SEO. I don't know if you can relate SEO to podcast, but it's very related to me because if somebody goes on Google and they type in something that they're having an issue with, and your podcast can come up if you do it right. So the question is like, what are your subtitles? Like, how are you captioning this podcast? What is it about? What are the important questions? Because you can really build your audience that way. You can really build your audience that way. And then another thing is telling people about your podcast because that's a great way to build listeners, like people that are already in your trust circle. I talked about trust circle. It's very important with anything you do as an entrepreneur. So you have your friends, share it with your family, share it with your friends, and they'll share it because they love you. Even if it's a trash podcast, they still. And then speaking of trash podcasts, that's also something that we're like working on. Structure is really important. My husband, he was working on a podcast much longer than me, What They Talk, and he's got a lot more followers and he's been really working on it. And they've been kind of massaging the structure for a while. And I think that people also feel loyal to a structure similar to Marvel comics. There's going to be like a crazy villain, there's going to be some amazing action, great out, all that stuff. So I think that if you think of what you want people to feel and to look forward to when you have a podcast, it's very similar to like a TV show or a comic. So you want to get people to be sort of hungry for the next one. There are different types of podcasts. So like where do you sit in that world of podcasts? Are you just telling stories? Who are you telling stories to? Why are you telling stories? Who's going to be listening to those stories? Or are you doing something that's more like kind of, what's the word? Kind of edgy. Like, are you trying to turn the pot? What's the expression?
Yeah, stir the pot.
Are you trying to stir the pot? Are you trying to get people mad? So like keep pushing that. So if you're doing that, push it, keep pushing that because I think that'll build your people will really be like, "Oh, yeah, I love this podcast because they talk a lot of shit about different types of desks." I think the biggest thing with a podcast is first get started, make sure your audio is good, and then pick like 2 places where you'll post it. Whether it's I don't know if TikTok is still gonna be around, but I would say like YouTube Shorts, YouTube, and Instagram or LinkedIn right now is optimizing their video content. So it's probably a really good time specifically now to like start posting your stuff on LinkedIn. But also take the time to edit it because I think that a lot of podcasts fail is because there's a lack of empathy and they're like, "Oh, I don't care if they hear breathing for like 5 minutes." Trust me, they do. They'll turn it off. They'll move on. So you have to have that empathy for like, "Oh, what is really interesting? What am I really saying? And what kind of value is that going to bring to someone?" Because people don't spend a lot of they probably spend like 25 seconds listening and then they decide whether it's their vibe or not. And then another thing to think about is your music, you know? What because that introduces the vibe of what you're doing. I have this one podcast called 20 Minutes of Darkness, and it's more focused on like grief and sad things. And we have like a very so and then we have another podcast that's kind of more vibey. It's for the Swurl community, and it's more kind of like something you want to get on the track and start rapping with too. So there's a lot of different styles that you can choose. So which one fits you, what fits what you're talking about. So that's all of those things matter. All of those things matter. And you keep refining it. So just keep doing it. And then as you go, you can kind of refine and refine. And what's nice is Canva has a lot of templates for you. So if you're not a designer, just get a template and just fix it up.
Launching a podcast is a lot like launching a startup, right? There's so many different pieces that are moving, and you have to really collaborate with other people and have relationships and deep conversations that have great meaning and value in order to move your startup forward. So, where do you see similarities between what you're doing with the podcast and what you're doing with the community?
Interesting. The community is a lot harder because there's a lot of technical stuff involved, right? But you can build a fast prototype and it is possible to move. It's a little bit easier with a podcast. I'm not gonna lie. You just need a mic and some way to record it. You don't have to use Riverside. Even though Riverside is very helpful because it has all the tools you need to get a good podcast going. So I do recommend it. One thing you could do with Riverside if you don't have a ton of money to spend up monthly, if you're still transitioning, is share it with a bunch of friends that are also podcasting. So it's like if then you guys could each pay like $10 a month and then you all benefit from it because you can get the Riverside studio and share your login. So there's ways. I do recommend Riverside though, I'm not gonna lie. I think it's definitely the best platform out there for doing podcasts, but you can just record on Zoom and put it out if you want to. I would definitely also look into like Buzzsprout, which allows you to sort of put things out into other platforms as well. And so I'm sure Ryan, you teach all of those different like yeah. So I won't get into that, but yeah, as far as the connection between this, I mean they're the same thing. There's just different types of startups. Like one is focused on building a prototype that people use, and another one is building a prototype that people listen to. So it's just those are the every I think that everything goes back to the same problem of like, here's my problem. How am I going to solve it? How am I going to execute it? And how I'm going to keep people interested. And then once you solve those problems and you have something and you have your startup, but pivoting is really important in both cases.
Earlier, you mentioned the book Traction. What kind of sources of information do you recommend to people who want to start something like this? Atomic Habits, yay! Yeah. I hear this book mentioned all the time. People love this book.
Yeah, I would say read that book first. Get the audio version and you can read it and take a walk and listen to it. But it's really helpful because if you don't have good habits and you don't know how to sort of create a lifestyle, you'll never run a good startup. It just won't work. But you said resources.
Yeah, books,
Is that what
resources, podcasts, any sources of inspiration you want our audience to take to heart as they think about what they're going to launch, be it a podcast or a brand new company.
It's not so much that, it's more about, like, pick something that you can't stop thinking about. Pick something that kinda makes you obsessed, whether it's a game that you play, whether it's, like, a topic that you always like to talk about, with it trees, mushrooms, it doesn't matter. So, I think that it's the your energy and your passion behind what you're doing is what's important. Otherwise, people don't wanna listen to someone talking kind of in a boring way about something they don't really care about. I think that finding that thing that you really are passionate about and then finding the people that are also passionate about it is a great start. If you're like a biker or you're really into motorcycles, that's the easy crowd to find. There's all these Facebook groups. So, like, figure out what you're passionate about, find out where those people live that are passionate about what you're passionate about, and then, like, market yourself there because they already care. It's harder to find people just randomly, like, if you just post on your feed on Facebook, most likely not a lot of people will see it, but then if you go into a specialized group, like a group, then they'll definitely look at it. Same with LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a lot of groups. There's a lot of alumni channels for colleges. So if you're going to college, use your alumni channel. 'Cause there's a little bit of a you're at an advantage because there's that built-in connection. Like, oh, you went to my school? Okay, I'll take a look at what you did. There's a little bit more of a likelihood that that'll happen. So,
That's such great advice. Okay, so we have traction and we have smart habits. Are there any other books that come to mind? Are there any other
my
sources that you like
God.
to pay attention to?
Yeah, there's so many books. I wish I got that. I can send you a list, but A Road Less Stupid is a good one. A Road Less Stupid also talks about kind of talks about entrepreneurial journeys that went wrong and sort of money wasted. And the good news is that most startups waste a lot of money, which made me feel better. Yeah. But I would say just getting started. Creative strategy, the business of design is really good because it gives you a sense of like what branding really is about and what knowing yourself. Because I think that before you even start your podcast, you need to know what you're about because you need to be very because if you're transparent about that and if people know you, then like this is Aya, she really cares about good layouts. She comes from Russian background, blah blah blah. All that stuff matters, and you need to know about who you are to build that connection because if it's very easy when you see someone who's pretending to be someone that they're not or people that just do what other people do, just knowing yourself and like thinking about it to the T. Like I usually have messy hair. That's just my vibe. And I'm embracing it because I'm just not that person that wakes up and like does like perfect hairstyles. And that's part of my brand. Some people do the opposite. Some people have like very done up hair or like big glasses, you have your thick frames. All of that is important because that's a point of recognizing who you are. So I think books on like brand are really important to start with, in my opinion. Brand and self-knowledge and yeah.
Are there any podcasts you recommend for founders who want inspiration?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that Chris Doe's Future podcast is great because he interviews a lot of entrepreneurs and they talk through a lot of there's actually a couple episodes on podcasting. So I think that that's a great place to start. Hold on. I told you before that I love The Best One Yet. It's just like a really fun podcast and it helps you learn about sort of like what's going on in the stock market and it just makes it interesting because as someone who's not in that world at all of that stock market talk can be very dry, but the way these guys talk about it, they just make it fun. They just like make it interesting. And that's why I feel like children make it child proof. Like make sure it's like because if a kid can listen to it and be like, "Oh, this is kind of fun," then you got something. For example, Innie, who we interviewed, she has a podcast on growth design, which is a very nerdy, data-centric topic, but it's really interesting. So if you're into that and you can get nerdy, then it's a great podcast. I love it.
Of the other people that you've interviewed, I'm sure you have come across some really fascinating people who
Yeah.
you could learn from, right? And you just said one person's name that what was her name? That she goes really deep on something?
Innie,
Annie.
she's in London and she's like a leader in growth design. Yeah.
Are there other people that you've met that really stood out and what made them stand out?
Sure, we have interviews lined up all month and everybody's been pretty amazing. One person that we talked to is a curator in Los Angeles and just like hearing her story and hearing how she kind of got to where she got was really really interesting because it makes you realize that sometimes it's not about taking a percentage. So she was saying that like she never takes a percentage of her artist's work and that she figured out a way to get paid from the city of Los Angeles, and do curations for artists and let them get the full. And that's pretty amazing to me. I think that's pretty cool. I'm trying to think, we also had a great conversation about psychological safety with an executive coach, Terrence, and he was just talking about how important it is as a leader to build that psychological safety in your work environment and how important it is for people to feel comfortable to speak their opinion out loud. And that was just like a really interesting podcast as well.
We have people who want to start a podcast and a business, and you're talking about both.
Our goal is to really showcase people and their stories and show how they grew and how they got to where they are now. And I think for us, that's really interesting, especially building a community because it allows people to have a little bit of a glimpse of a person. And then those people are going to be in our community. So they'll be like, oh, I listened to your podcast. I know kind of what you're doing. That's kind of our approach.
Building those connections that then help build the community, which is your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest with you, I've listened to so many podcasts where I ended up reaching out to people and like becoming their friend because of what they said. I'm like, hey, I really resonated with what you said. Can we have a conversation? And then actually the lady that wanted to invest 50% into my company, I met her because she was speaking at a conference. She was on stage and she was just talking about how she scaled and worked on her business. She was very focused on like fashion marketing. And I was like, oh, this lady is so brilliant. And I was like, well, maybe I could talk to her and get her advice. I just wanted her advice. I didn't even think she was trying to invest. I came up to her. I was like, hey, I would love to, really, really was inspired by your talk. Would love to jump on a Zoom sometime in a couple weeks. And she's like, oh, yeah, absolutely. Here's my email, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, cool. And so we jumped on a call. I showed her what I was working on. And she's like, oh, I don't really invest in people a lot. And I would love to invest in you.
Your ideal customer, your ideal community member. Paint us a picture.
If you go into like a baby store, you see like this sort of baby stuff. And if you're looking for something for you, you'll know very fast that it's not for you. So a lot of mistakes that people make is like, I want to make something for everybody, everyone. And that's always a really bad thing. And obviously we weren't at that point, but we had like four distinct personas. One was kind of the student graduating, another one was the sort of more senior tech person in transition, another one was an investor, and then another one was kind of a founder persona. And they're all great personas. But when you get started, you're going to fail if you try to design for all of them. Just period. Period. So I think that one really good thing we did was we picked one and we really dug into their story and we wrote down almost like an entire page of fake history of someone who actually was that target persona, which was our kind of senior specialist. And I think that's really important. And then you can build like a segment, like, you have empathy maps. There's so much stuff in UX that you can do, so many exercises to kind of see what are the needs of that person? What are their pain points? What do they do when they're chilling? What are they thinking? What are they feeling all the time? Who's around them? What magazines do they listen? What magazines do they read? What do they listen to? What's their current financial status? And I think that those are really important things. There's a little bit of a difference between a segment and a persona, and it depends on what you're working on. There's a lot of thought around that, like what's a better way to approach it. But either way, I think that us kind of focusing in on one of the demographics was a huge part of it. And it allowed us to focus on a single need and a single problem. Because ideally, a good product solves one problem first, right?
And what is that single need and single problem for your ideal audience persona of this
Right.
expert, of the senior expert?
Yeah, so the senior expert who doesn't post just wants a peaceful place to share. And that's really what we're creating. And that'll be useful. It'll trickle down. It'll be useful for other people to have that type of space. So
A
that's kind of
peaceful
more.
place to share.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think that, like, there's a lot of problems as far as feedback is concerned too, because when people post stuff, they don't know who's gonna comment. They don't know if they're trustworthy or not. So if you create a group of trustworthy people, there's a lot of power in that because if somebody comes in and asks them a question, they can refer to something they shared or they can help them, and they already know coming in, like, "Oh, this person is an expert." There's a lot of power in that.
Power in getting specific on the audience
Yeah.
and what they.
Yeah, because you don't like nobody wants people want stuff that's made for like we're very selfish creatures, when we're hungry, we want to eat.
You want to feed your audience. You want to make sure that your audience has what they need and is getting what they came to the community for so that they
Exactly.
stay.
Like if they don't like if they want hot dogs and you're giving them like a salad, they're not going to be happy even though salad's probably better for you, but still. You gotta know who, and then what if then you gotta think about, I think restaurants are great because they really do think about, like, who they're serving to. There's those crappy restaurants that even have a dress code. I don't go to those, but they know who their demographic is. And then you can talk about concerts, the same thing. Like, there's concerts where people sit and watch, and there's concerts when people are dancing and standing and nodding their heads. So it's all a vibe. You have to know to create a good environment as a podcaster or as an entrepreneur, you have to really understand the vibe that somebody is looking for and the feeling that they want to have. There's a guy named Tom Ross. Wait,
Yes,
Lauren.
Tom Ross, the community guy. Yes.
Yeah. So he's all about feel, know, do, right? And then I think that's genius. And I think that every product has that because when you encounter any product, you have to feel, even if it's like nail scissors. Like imagine if you're cutting with scissors that are like kind of sharp and uncomfortable and industrial. That's not good. And you get some smooth scissors that are nice and easy to hold. That's that feeling that you get. Everything starts with a feeling. So I think that there's something genius there. And in order to know the feeling that you want to create, you got to know who you're creating the feeling for. And you can't generalize. You can't, because everyone is so different. Even culturally, like people from different countries, different parts of the world, like they're going to feel very different about a certain experience. So the more specific you are, the better.
Like, I'm coming to this new community and I want to be a part of it. And I want more specifically new students for my courses or new clients for my coaching. Whenever I share something, I'm sharing in part because I want that. But why else am I sharing? Is it just because it's a peaceful place to share, or is there more reasons embedded in the meaning of the community?
Well, you also want that visibility, right? You want people to listen to your podcast and you want to be a trusted source, right? And in sort of a loud environment where all these other networking platforms live, you're not going to get that visibility if you're sort of kind of a more down to earth, quiet type person, right? So that's also the motivation. It's not just about sharing, it's about being seen too.
When we start our business, there's always these legal questions like, how do we actually incorporate? I know LLC was the right choice for me. Tell us about that decision.
So we're actually an S corp now, just because we have a lot of other things that we're working on. So it's like easier, you get more money back. But I think it's also really important to think about like who you're serving because there's also a lot of good government, like nonprofit opportunities that you can find. So if your idea fits into one of those, it might be a better fit for you. So I would say, I guess my recommendation is just make sure you know how you want your business to be structured and then talk to someone who knows about how those businesses are structured and then make a decision there. Don't just choose something. Don't go on LegalZoom and just choose an LLC. Talk to someone, understand why you want an LLC and what that's going to do for you tax wise. We got a ton of money back this year because it was all losses. So I just want to say, like, find a good accountant and just make sure your structure run. And because we're an S corp, that really helped. So just keep that in mind. If you're making a startup, you're going to lose a lot of money in the beginning, and that's good. That's what you're supposed to. That's what's expected, and that's what the government even is built to help you with, right? So just make sure that you know how to structure things so you don't suffer so many losses. It's really helpful. You can even if you structure, you can even like lease a car on your business. So think about it like that. Like everything that you do can be connected to your business. If you take a friend out, that could be like a business meal, like that's a write off.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Ika, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom. And you said we go to ikawilliams.com to find
Yes,
you?
that's right.
Excellent.
IkaWilliams.com or on LinkedIn.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much.